Can we talk about Dungeons and Dragons, dungeons, and creativity? Well, first, we'll focus on the creativity issue. And it's an issue because I think there's a lack of creativity right now in the hobby. A lack of the type of creativity that the hobby needs. The lifeblood of the tabletop role-playing game hobby has to do with creativity. And I think there's a lot of things in the way of our creativity. I'll get to that. Okay. So let's talk about it. There's AI. Games have been around for decades, all the ideas out there. I mean, just decades of work done. Like, and third-party material. By the time you get to a game, there's so much to lean on. Any pressure of you needing to create your own thing or come up with a new idea just is almost non-existent, right? There's no pressure. And creativity requires the candle to burn, meaning there has to be pressure on some people to create an environment where that creativity is going to surface, where it's going to come up because you don't have the thing you need. There's a lack of something, and you need to fill that need. And if you don't try to do it, your mind just might do it. You know, you're playing the old game, right? Back in the 80s, when I started, there wasn't much, right? Pretty sure it's the same for the 70s guys. And a lot of creativity came from that. A lot of the games that you know about came from that. A lot of the game designers, the older guys that had been around forever, making all these different, new games and ideas. It all comes from a lack of something being there, and that pressure, puts a need. It creates a need. Somebody wants to make something. And then you got a market, of course, that is going to need all these things. There's so many reasons. And you don't have AI to lean on, so something isn't doing the writing for you. There's not a lot of third-party stuff out there. It's all on you. But what happens when we cycle into the future? All the reasons that normally would be there for somebody to be creative in the hobby when it first started, back in the day when I was there, they're not here now. Like, they're just not here. And so we lose a lot of real creativity. And what I don't like about a lot of the third-party stuff, there's a lack of creativity now. Third-party material is just an extension of what? Stuff that's already on the market. No new ideas in that sense. And then we even have in the old school a thing called the OSR, where it's all about cloning somebody else's game. Right? When I brought out my Neo TTRPG System, I realized it's the first time in a long time somebody in the old school brought something really new out with new ideas that was original. That wasn't a clone. It wasn't nothing like that. It wasn't a copy and paste of somebody else's work. And how I did that was just by not leaning on everything else out there. I personally didn't lean on AI the way people have now. Look, the only area where I forgive myself a bit is on the art. But even that, I'd rather finance somebody to do the art. I just can't afford it right now. But put that aside. The reason I was able to create that was I put a limitation on myself. I didn't lean on everything. I made myself create everything. Great thing is, I'm an old school 2nd edition dungeon master, and that system really, really pushed you into your creativity unlike any other edition to ever exist for Dungeons and Dragons. Anyone who claims otherwise, I'm going to tell you right now, they're full of shit. So how do we get back to a place of creativity where there's pressure for you to make something? Well, with everything else out there, you're going to have to limit yourself. Not just lean on everything that's already there as support, like a crutch. Here's what I would suggest to any new person in the hobby. You might not like old school D&D, but do me a favor. You might be interested in this whole idea. Go back to the old school. It's not hard to get the old books. You can get them cheap, no problem. And then I want you to do this. I want you to make your own dungeon. Well, how would you do that? Well, we'll get to that. I'll talk about how I simplistically do dungeons. And you can take my methods and just make your own. It's not hard. But there's going to be a reason I want you to do the dungeon. Because the dungeon is the most basic layer of gameplay that there is. Like everything else you do, every other type of thing you do is a reflection of what you'll do when you run a dungeon. Like at least in Dungeons and Dragons is what I mean, and that's what the subject is here. I'm not talking about other tabletop role-playing game systems. I'm focused on D&D, right? So this, if you're in the D&D world, I'm talking about being creative in that world, right? I acknowledge there's a lot of other games out there, and if you care about them, you take some of these ideas, run over there and do that with them. But we're going to focus on D&D for now. The dungeon gives you structured gameplay. Okay? So let me explain that. Like, it's like you walk down the dungeon hall, there's the rooms, there's the turns, there's the everything. You might think that sounds really basic. How would all that apply to every other part of the game? Well, I admit, city and town, adventuring and traveling through those places can be somewhat unique. You might not be out doing the normal adventure, so your experience there is going to be a bit different. But for the rest of it, outside of just saying you travel down a road, when you go into a forest or a mountain, you're on the sea, whatever, there's always surprise this. Like, you're going down a path, there's a secret to the left, a secret to the right, maybe something obvious, and the DM has to decide if there's going to be traps, secrets, and all these things there. And it's going to be very similar how they design that. I mean, even in the ocean, your boat's going this way, you can run either the thing is face on or tear. Every bit of design for a DM is going to be, even in the forest, same thing. You're walking down the path, well, to the right or left could be areas. Could be a little campsite. Well, there's suddenly a room, like you would find in a dungeon. Now, if you get all this, I'm not trying to be too flaky on it, I'm just trying to make you understand that most of what you do in the dungeon gameplay will be reflected in what you do elsewhere. Like, just be similarities to what you're doing. So, by really focusing on getting good at running a dungeon, it automatically carries over to every other part of the game. Instantly. Makes you a better DM. You might not realize that. You might not appreciate the dungeon part in Dungeons and Dragons. Right? And I'm not saying you always have to run dungeons. Even I get bored of those things. Not a big fan myself. But early on, one of the things I did as a young game master was really focused on doing some of the dungeon running. For the sake of really getting the structure down and then taking that over to other areas, realizing I'm just making everything the same. And so it was really beneficial understanding that structure and making it through dungeon gameplay, leading over to other things. Now, once you understand the basics, why is that so important? Like, you can do all these cool things with 5e. Why would you want to step back and not do all the things that you see you could do with 5e? Well, I'm not talking about you going back for the sake of cool. And I'll be honest with you. I think what you call cool, what excites you, is not really that exciting. I think you undervalue the more simple side of old school D&D. I think you really do. And here's why. Our characters, through role-playing and everything else in old school, can be some of the most exciting things. And when you take off the focus on all these different actions, when you take off all that focus, and as a player, you're left just to focus on the more simplistic side of your character, personality, things like this. You don't got 50 other things to lean on. Like, if it's going to be fun, you got to lean on these things. But what you find out is these things are things you're not leaning on in the new gaming, and you're missing out on something. And old school reminds you how exciting it is to really focus on just the simple, fucking unique personality of your character. Where in old school, we could have fighters all have the same shit, both be human, same weapons used, everything else. And when you meet them, they're completely different from each other. They're awesome in personality. They're both unique. Maybe some of the techniques and things they do are very different from each other, even if they use the same weapons. But the personalities are drastically different. It's because there's not 50 things for the players to really play on. So if you're not going to lean a bit into the fucking personality of your character and let that develop and separate and be something exciting, yeah, old school turns into a fucking boring board game. There's no doubt. And it does happen. But the aim of old school is once you can appreciate these things and lean into them, you realize that's not really there in the same way in 5e. Like, you'll really notice. Why do you think they give you backgrounds already pre-written? Right? So here, we'll give you a personality because we know, with all the focus on all this other shit, this will be undervalued. Or if you do value it, we have to sort of help you get there because you're not going to do anything to get there on your own. Because we have you focusing on all this other shit over here. And I'll tell you this, that sort of made-up background, that experience with a somewhat character you know, is not going to be as good or as valuable or teach you as much as you developing a character, without the help of the system. Just you developing a personality from scratch, which you would do in old school. You create a relationship with your character. And that is not something you actually do with the character in the 5e game. In old school, you develop a relationship with your character to the point at one point the character truly becomes a separate entity from you. Not some crazy way, but to the point where if somebody asks you what your character thinks, you could be like, he or she, yeah, they would say no to this right away. And you'll notice players can do that after so long in old school. You don't even play long campaigns in the new school. There is no point where you're really going to say, my guy would say no to this. You could look at the so-called made-up background by the 5e book or whatever, wherever you got it. It says, oh, my character might not do this, but even that becomes a little vague to you because you haven't built the relationship up and you're not sure. Now, you might think making an old school dungeon can be a little difficult, pain in the ass. Not really. It's really easy. Now, there's all kinds of pain in the ass techniques for doing dungeons where people, I think, do things ass backwards. Just all the wrong steps, don't really get it. So let's go over my ways. Now, when it comes to drawing out a dungeon, I start off with something really random. I don't make any decisions beforehand. I don't care how many floors. I don't think if it's going to be straight or curved or if it's a tunnel type of thing compared to like some man-made underground area. I don't think that. I just go in and go, what are my instincts telling me to draw? And I won't try to draw in rooms and all that. I'll just draw the shape of the, the halls. Shit like this, right? I might not even decide exactly where the entrance is. I'm just going to make something that looks something like a dungeon or tunnels or something like that. At least a single floor of shit. Now, this is before I'm going to add anything else. That's a start. Once I got that framework set, well, now I can decide if I want rooms like off to the side in this hallway, where the turns are, and I could put some other funky things in there. Like, could be like, I start making decisions to put some unique things in there, but they'll all need an explanation. Like, why is there a well underground? Well, you're going to find out, right? But this is where you start adding some ideas, again, some random stuff, just random. Like, it's like you'll put the well in there and go, I don't have an explanation for it. I'll be like, yeah, right? Just to say. Now, after you make some decisions like that, where rooms could be, other things like that, you go now to the brainstorming paperwork, where you're going to write some things out, right? Like, it's at one point you'll be writing out the information for each room, the well, everything else. Now you got to decide, make some notes. You're not going to write it all out, but what is the idea behind the well that you could have, why you could have it there? What are potential monsters that could be down there? What are the rooms potentially? And these are all notes. Don't set anything in stone. Little quick notes you can make on each thing, right? And you also want to decide if there's another floor. Now, at the end of that, you really need to bring everything together. So after you do all those little notes, at the end you got to go, okay, let me give a bit of like a paragraph framework for this entire thing. It's like you sort of want to give a layout, like a sort of description to yourself of what you're creating. So it is going to be 2 floors. This guy's going to own it. There's going to be these monsters, blah, blah. So you look at your little notes you just made, and you're going to sort of put that together. Now you have an overall idea of what you're really doing. It's before you make the whole thing, right? So now you could even go in and add some stuff. Maybe during the brainstorming of that, you come up with some other ideas you could draw into the area. Go ahead. And maybe because you put a well down there, you come up with some other ideas this monster would have to be there. This, because you're trying to justify it, and that's good. Because all this justification, trying to explain the random, is going to give you excuses for thinking of other things, bringing other ideas in, and really coloring up the thing you had. This is where you're starting to make it real, right? Where it's coming together. And now you got to remember you're running a dungeon, a game. So it's how many encounters. You got to make sure there's not just, a random room with one encounter. It's like, okay, is that going to fit the gameplay? So you got to consider gameplay on top of realism and everything else. But this is not hard, and this is part of learning to be a real game master, right? When you start realizing, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot to it. But you're going to learn here. This is going to be you spreading out your mind to think and come up with ideas. And so, again, at the end of all this and explaining, now you can really draw out the rest, right? Okay, now it's time to make up the encounter in the room, some other things, maybe some random monsters that might be floating around the area, shit like that. Traps, if you want to put them in there, not just a well, there could be traps, right? All kinds of things, chests with treasure, secret rooms, where, you box over here, that's a secret room. All right, so, and there's techniques, there's some game rules and game mechanics that are going to help you out with that area where you roll the dice, and it's all set up for the secret room thing that you can apply. Hence, Dungeons and Dragons is going to be made for the typical underground dungeon play. Now, unlike new school, here's another great thing about old school. It's not that it's better, it's about teaching you to be a good game master. In the new school, they have everything, all the stats boxed out for you. Tells you exactly what to do. In the old school, well, it makes you mess around with the stats and figure it out. Do these guys overwhelm my characters here, the player characters? It is a learning process, but it really is good to understand the numbers. So you don't need to depend on, say, something like 5e. Here's what I don't like about WotC. A lot of the WotC editions are hand-holding, walking you through, so it's no pressure for you to learn anything. Right, for you to figure it out on your own. And if you don't figure it out on your own, you're not going to make too many games. And don't you think that's what WotC wants? It's not like it's looking to develop its competition, if you get what I'm saying. They don't want you to figure this shit out. They give you all the answers. There's no pressure. Here you can go back and try to, what would line up. Now it gives you a hint, what would be good against what levels, how many hint dice. So you can take all the information remember, old school is all about a guideline. There's a lot less telling you exactly what to do. It's more like, hey, this is what you could do, but really do what you want, right? So when you look back at this stuff, take it like a guideline, but you're going to experiment, and you might have a couple flops in the experiment. This is part of learning as a DM, like to be a game master, or dungeon master, whatever term you'd like to use, whatever label you'd like to take, right? So it's all part of the process. Now, drawing it out and then writing it out that way means you pretty much have some things in there. It doesn't mean you can't put some other random ideas in, like sort of floaty ideas that you might not bother to apply to the situation, but what if you run out? What if things go too fast? What if you need just something else? What if you can't justify the things you have in there covering this little area where the players happen to go over and you weren't thinking about that? Well, this is where having some other random ideas on the side, sort of scratched in, notes, stuff like that could be very helpful. So after you make the 1 or 2 floors or whatever you're making of the dungeon, maybe the 1 floor, you make some other just side ideas. Not stuff you want to need to set in stone or need to apply, but they're there. They're there for the maybe just in case, right? It's like having monster tables or stuff like that. Hey, bring something like that to assist you. No problem with that. Now some DMs get so used to it, or Game Master get so experienced that they can cycle in whatever they want without needing a table. But that learning process, bring a table, monster table, something random to help you make sure you're not running out of fucking material for your players. That's part of the learning process, is trying to figure out how much you need compared to how much you don't. Don't think you're going to be a fucking genius at the first go at this. Plan to fail, but here's what you can make sure. How can you secure the game for your players so your own inexperience doesn't hurt the night or destroy the entire night or flop the game? This is where a random monster table or random ideas are going to be your saving grace. It's your backup. You flop, you go to them. You save the night. That's the whole point of the backup. Right now, of course, as you get more experience, you'll hear about people saying no prep and you can improvise and make things up off the top of your head. Well, if you're really new to this, you're not there yet. But part of all this will develop that. But do this part and don't get ahead of yourself. And it's nice to be able to improvise and bring stuff up, but a lot of game masters, what they do is, as they get used to doing that and they can do it, they get lazy. They forget that no matter how good they are, they're going to have some off nights. And those nights absolutely flop as they have nothing prepped for it. And guess what? As hot as they were all the other sessions before that, tonight or that night, they're not hot, right? And they have no backup. So they learn the hard way. Right? Some people just want to keep being lazy, so yeah, they'll keep promoting that. But yeah, it's, to me, if you're responsible for the experience, and that's what a game master is, responsible for the experience, not just for yourself, but for the players as well. You are responsible because you are managing it. That's why you're giving your authority. So, given that you're responsible, if a night flops because you sucked on improvising that night, no matter how hot you were before that moment, you are responsible for that night going to shit. And that's why you should always have backup to make sure that doesn't happen. Now here's another simple way to do a dungeon. Description. Hey, you're not going to draw nothing out. And I mean this. Right? I mean this. Right? Instead of drawing out that frame at first, right, you're going to write down some of the basic ideas that you want with the dungeon. Maybe 2 floors, boom, 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 several rooms. You can write all this stuff out once you sort of brainstorm how much you want in. So you're just going to brainstorm structure. You're not even going to say what much you want right away. Just how big the place could be. And everything you're going to curve into that. So you're not trying to make the dungeon curve into the other thing. You're trying to make whatever you find curve into the dungeon. And through that, you're maybe find some things that end up not working. You got to take out, just doesn't work with this random start setup, right? And that happens. It's all part of the learning process. There's nothing wrong with needing to take something out and figure it out so you can know in the future how you might want to set up the structure going forward so it's a little easier to apply certain things. But again, you got to do it on your own without me helping you there. And you got to take this framework. It's like, it sounds a little random, but what I'm saying is, you start off, okay, I'm going to have one floor. I might have this many rooms. You want to write some very basic shit down. Like, write some basic shit down. And, you know, that's the starting point. Now you want to decide what monsters and everything else. Like, that's the next basic brainstorm. Now, at the end of this, you decide the monsters, the rooms, the encounters, but you haven't made the encounters. And there's no pressure to right away. Now it's time to draw out the dungeon, but only in words, description. Okay, see, enter, here's the first hallway. Where do we go from here? You have how many rooms on this floor? Okay, how many turns? And you're going to decide this. And I want you to understand this is not going to be hard. You can come down, you can make it simple right or left. Whatever, at the end of the hallway, there's doors on either side. So maybe the first door, or two doors, two rooms are right in that first area. And then it's like on the left, it's going to be this door. And you're going to, either way, your description is going to lead you either to a dead end or at one point a set of stairs to another floor or to the next rooms or to another turn. And all you're doing is designing it to cover the things you need it to cover. And then you got to, as you're doing it, decide how you want the place to look. Right? But that will be true even with the, if you go back to the drawing part. Right? Some basic descriptions are good. A lot of people spend too much time on flavor. They talk too much. Like, if I bring you to an area, I want to give you the most basic information. I don't want to color it up too much because I want your imagination to really run it. And if I talk too much in that flavor talk, you start focusing on what I'm saying instead of just focusing on really developing the place with your imagination. An experienced game master knows that, so they know to give you basic information. And it can be more haunting and scary the way you want it to be when you're just straightforward. This like this in here. And combine that with being a serious game master. Don't be somebody who holds back on character death. Let things happen. Don't be a bad DM or adversarial DM or game master. Don't do none of that. Just run the game as it is. And if character death comes, you just let it happen. Do that the first time, and players will instantly take you serious. And that's another element about game mastering. It's not just, oh, you're good at it because you walk into a room of new people. You really start being able to be good with the group once you develop a relationship with them, like them taking you serious. And now you give out a description of what really basic of what could be a spooky area. But they're actually like, oh, okay, this is worrisome. Because it's not just some other fucking game master they don't know. It's a guy they know that if it is a spooky place, there could be the monster. And that can eat us for sure, for real. And we will die because this motherfucker, game master, he ain't going to hold back on anyone. He ain't out to get us, but he ain't out to save us either. And honestly, I can't think of a better relationship you can have with players. Players that take you serious because you simply just do the job, and they don't see you as an adversarial DM. There's nothing negative. They just understand. Okay, all right, that's it. This guy doesn't hold back. Having that relationship is so fucking important to everything else you do and the experience that your players have. All right, so remember that as a young DM. So when you're learning, all the things I just told you, I hope you can sort of take it and put it together yourself. It's not hard. I don't need to give you too much. You can go sit at the table and start writing up the stuff and listen back to this and go, yeah, okay, I see what he's saying. I see how I can finish this up through description. Or I see how I can draw this out. It's really basic shit. I don't overkill on dungeons. I bring the flavor in through sort of simplicity starting points, and then you're just building on simplicity, right? Instead of trying to be too complex right away, you slowly bring the complexity in properly. It's like you make love to the dungeon, if you get what I'm saying, right? You're making love to it. You're taking care of it. You're making sure everything works right. And you're doing that for the sake of the experience for your players. And you want to make something cool for your own experience, because even the experience creating the thing is meant to be fun. Right? Not work. Fun. Okay, for now, I love you. At least most of you. Take care.